Greetings, Israel. This teaching is titled Arsareth Found. Final Proof. The debate is over. So before we continue, I wanted to give thanks to Brother Yanai Not Sorry on YouTube for sharing his findings with us. He spent time in looking at some ancient maps and discovered Arsareth on those maps, and we're going to get into that today. So let's continue.
The Hebrew Israelites, God's chosen people, are what we call African American. Okay, they're not African and they're not American. They are God's chosen people, as well as the Indians and the Mexicans.
Well, she got part of it right. The African American, the so-called African American, the Negro that was scattered via the Atlantic slave trade around the world, to the islands, to Brazil, to Haiti. They are the true Hebrew Israelites of the Bible, the descendants of Jacob. But how did this lie become a stronghold in the minds of our people and, as you can see, the Gentiles? How is it that she believes that the Mexicans and Native Americans are also of the same lineage as the so-called Negro or true Hebrew Israelite? Well, the answer is repetition. Repetition is a method of brainwashing where if you repeat something long enough, you begin to believe it. And if you notice with the camps, they teach all of their, I guess you could say, students to repeat that mantra. The Native Americans, the Indians, the Latins, the Latinos, right? They make you repeat that. And that's the technique used to make them believe something that's obviously a lie.
If you have language that activates an idea which is physically there in your brain, every time it's activated, it gets stronger. The more it's repeated and activated, the stronger it gets.
So the way we got here is through repetition, and they use 2 Ezra chapter 13 as part of their support for this argument, right? That Israel went to a land where no man dwelled, that they crossed the river, right, of Euphrates and went to another land. And we know if the father had to hold back water, they walked, but we're going to get into that. And if you notice, they leave out the Brazilians, who are the largest number, which has the largest number of slaves from the Atlantic slave trade of any Israelite group anywhere, right? More than America, more than Jamaica. Brazil has the most Hebrew Israelites being mistreated in Brazil of any group, but they don't make the list. But right, common sense tells you this chart is a lie. Genetically, it makes no sense, but that is the power of repetition. And so by showing you where Arsareth is, according to some map makers, we begin to tear down the brainwashing. We begin to enter into true history. So let's begin. So in today's teaching, we're going to show you where Arsareth is likely to be, according to some European maps, some old maps. And we're going to begin with actually reading 2 Ezra 13, well, parts of it. So 2 Ezra 13, 39 to 45. And whereas thou sawest that he gathered another peaceable multitude unto him, those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hosea the king, whom Salmanassar the king of Assyria led away captive, and he carried them over the waters. And so came they into another land. But they took this counsel among themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen, and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt, that they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into the Euphrates by the narrow places of the river. For the Most High then showed signs for them, and held still the flood till they were passed over. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half, and the same region is called Arsareth. So, according to many scholars, during the time of Shalmaneser, you can see the red line here, right? 724 to 729 BCE. He crossed the Euphrates River, right? And we can see the Euphrates River right here, this yellow line that I drew, right? Leaving Jerusalem, crossing the waters, as in 2 Ezra 13, and taken as slaves into the Assyrian land, where we have here someone to Gozam and Nineveh in Assyria, right? They went this way. So we can follow that route as they exited their homeland into Assyrian territory under the power of Shalmaneser. So you can look at this African map, and it's a rough example of the trek into a land where no man dwelt, into a territory where Arsareth has been found, which is Algeria. Okay, so Israel always historically went through Egypt, fleeing their enemies, and went into Egypt and into Africa for safety. And they ended up in a land where no man dwelt at that time, which was labeled Arsareth. So the Claudius Ptolemy map. Let's take a look at that. So here on page 177, you have Arsareth right here. Okay, and you have Sinus Numidicus. Right now, I have this for a reason, just to verify for you that this is Africa. Okay, but here's a close-up, and you see here, right, circled, Arsareth. And the Sinus Numidicus, right? Well, you could say right now with this close-up, well, where's that, right? So I have this additional map here from Pleiades, right? And it shows you the same spot, the same marking along the Mediterranean. Let's zoom out, and there we go. Same shot. And you can see it is North Africa as they trekked from their homeland through Egypt, right, through Libya into what is known today as Algeria. Okay, so let's look at the Martin Waldseemüller map of 1507. And here we have Arsareth, right? Same location. This is the Mediterranean. Arsareth, same place, same location as the other map, right? You can see it. I turned it around for you. Arsareth, Mediterranean, same location. Okay, so Arsareth was known to be in this location at some point by historians and map makers. Okay, so here's another angle for you, right along the African coast on the Mediterranean. Arsareth. So Algeria is where Arsareth is located. According to this map, this is a different angle for you to see what those ancient maps were pointing to. Okay, and this is Algeria. So it's an area in Algeria, and that is where the historical location of Arsareth was located prior to the invasion of the Muslims. Okay, and the Muslims kicked our people out, right? Some of the 10 tribes out of that land, and they went south later, but we're going to go further into that. So Algeria, the area of Arsareth. So in this area, right, that we have identified as Arsareth, there's an oasis area called Tuat. Tuat oasis were important in the trans-Saharan trade because of their location at the northern end of the Tenay Roof route. Ragane is around 1,150 kilometers north of the town of Gao and a similar distance from Timbuktu. Caravans from the Sudan would continue northward to towns such as Sijil Massa or Clemson. The oases are not mentioned by any of the early Arabic geographers, but it appears that Jews lived in the oasis at an early date, as a tombstone discovered in a village of the Buda region has an inscription in Hebrew with a date of 1329. So at least up until the 14th century, 13th, 14th century, there were Hebrews living there, right? And that lines up with 2 Ezra in this location identified as Arsareth. So the Zakhor are Malian Jews who once lived in Algeria. But let's continue. Zakhor, Black Judaizing movement in Mali, comprising around 1,000 people. It was founded in Timbuktu in 1993 by the Malian historian Ismail Dade Hadara, whose followers claim to be the offspring of Saharan Jews. In a manifesto published in 1996, the members of the Zakhor recognized themselves as Jews and declare themselves to be descendants of the Jews of Tuat. The Tuat, the region at the limits of the Sahara in western Algeria, was up to 1492 inhabited by Jews involved in trans-Saharan trade. At that time, Sheikh Abd el-Krim el-Magili, a scholar and a mystic, exterminated them and ordered the destruction of their synagogues at Silji Masa and Taminatit. Now understand this, family. In 1492, the Muslims did the same exact thing as the Catholic Church did in Spain to our people. If you couldn't pay, you were kicked out of their land. And they were kicked out of, in Spain, they were kicked out of Spain and Portugal into Africa. And when the Muslims came, they did the same thing in the same year. The exact same year that the Catholic Church kicked our people out was the year the Muslims invaded North Africa and kicked our people out of North Africa. The exact same year. What does that mean? That means Psalm 83 began. Psalm 83 was in effect where the nations conspired together to destroy Israel. And that's what happened here. So according to Zakhor, some of the Jewish survivors from Tuat, following the routes of caravans, took refuge with other Jews settled along the Niger. So they joined our people along the Niger River. But their safety was only temporary. Soon afterwards, in 1493, under the influence of the same El-Maghili, Askia Muhammad the Great, the ruler of this region, introduced an edict, right, just like Spain did, right, Spain and Portugal, listen to this, family, introduced an edict for the eviction of the Jews of the Songhai. So in the Songhai region, which is West Africa, the Muslims introduced an edict to evict our people, just like Spain, just like Portugal. They apparently found themselves in the position of choosing either to renounce their faith or to die. Wasn't that the same criteria that the Catholic Church gave our people in Europe? Renounce your faith or die. Hadara, the leader of Zachor, noted that the Jews could not go further in front of the great Nile of the Arabs, that is, the river Niger. They stopped facing the Quran and the sword. So the Muslims and the Catholics obviously worked together and gave the exact same edict: convert or die. At the same time, during the same year, they began at the same time. So Psalm 83 is in effect conspiring against our people to enslave us. And that's when all this began, and that's what Psalm 83 is about. All the nations conspired. So as we continue about the Zachor, they converted. This was how he concluded the black Jews became Muslim. So all our people in West Africa today who are Muslim became Muslim by the sword. Convert or die. Really no different than what the Catholic Church did as well. Okay, so today, the members of Zachor portray themselves as a small, early Jewish population which is said to have been superseded by the subsequent Islamic community, with only tiny remnants of Judaism surviving. The heads of the families who founded Zachor relate that the three families constituting their community from the 16th century, the Levite Kehat, now named Kati, the Cohens, and the Abanas, were not in fact the first Jewish inhabitants of these regions. In the 11th century, El-Bakri and El-Idrisi, the great Arab historians and geographers, referred to the presence of populations who read the Torah, or the Torah, in what would become Mali. Abraham Cresquet, the famous Majorcan Jewish geographer, upon establishing the Catalan Atlas in 1375, presumably located Mali and its emperor on the basis of information from his Malian co-religionists. Leo Africanus, who visited this region in the first part of the 15th century, the Tariq el-Sudan of the 15th century, and the Tariq el-Fatash of the 17th century, the essential corpus or sources of information about medieval Western Africa, mention the presence of Jews in the region of Gao and Tindirma. Under the aegis of UNESCO, the gradual discovery at Timbuktu of old manuscripts, some of which date back to the 13th century, constitutes an unpublished scientific treasure trove likely to bring much information about the possible settlement of Jews in this area. So as much as the Europeans like to excavate and find ancient documents and translate them, they have not spent any money to translate all of those documents in Timbuktu. Why? Because it exposes to the world who the true Hebrews are, and that they did go to Africa, and that they did live around the Niger River and in West Africa. Conclusion. The information provided here today is the best information out there today for identifying the true location of Arsareth. This information agrees completely with the writings found in 2 Ezra chapter 13, where according to scripture, the so-called 10 lost tribes walked across the Euphrates River from the land of the Assyrians. According to the maps provided, you can see that the Israelites had to head back west toward Africa. According to scripture, they journeyed for 1.5 years to reach this land known as Arsareth. We know that the Father held back the waters for them so that they may cross the Euphrates. It is very easy to deduce from this information that if they had boats, then there would be no need for the Most High to hold back the waters for them so that they may cross safely. So basic common sense alone proves that Israel walked across the Euphrates, leaving from the land of Assyria. One more thing to note. The 10 tribes were obviously traveling with women, children, and elderly, so this would most definitely limit their ability to travel too far within 1.5 years. It is reasonable to conclude that the land where no man dwelt was somewhere in Africa. And according to Eldad the Hani, or Eldad the Danite, some of the lost 10 tribes entered into Africa by foot and fought some of the Cushite tribes in the land. So make sure you read Eldad the Danite's testimony for yourself. There are many Hebrew tribes in East Africa as well today. Okay? So if you like what we do, support us at Patreon. Our address is patreon.com/TEOTW. And our social network is teoministries.ning.com. And that's TEOTW ministries.ning.com, not TEO. So, typo. Peace and blessing, Israel. Your captivity is ending.